What happens when television swings big and misses even bigger? The 1960s gave us timeless classics, but it also produced some of the strangest, shortest-lived flops ever broadcast. These weren't just minor stumbles, they were bold experiments that crashed almost as soon as they aired. From bizarre comedies to spin-offs, nobody asked for the graveyard of 60s TV is crowded, and buried inside it are some spectacular stories you've probably never heard. Turn On, 1969. Imagine a sketch comedy so offbeat that stations actually pulled the plug halfway through its first airing. That was Turn On, ABC's bold attempt to out-weird Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. Instead of traditional sets and jokes, the show relied on rapid-fire editing, electronic music, and surreal gags. It looked like television on fast-forward designed to shock as much as entertain. The trouble? Viewers weren't ready. Advertisers bailed before the premiere was even over, and some affiliates refused to continue broadcasting after the first commercial break. The format was so experimental that critics compared it to watching a machine malfunction in real time. For 1969, it was light years ahead, but completely alien to audiences expecting punchlines they could follow. Only one episode aired, and the second, already taped, never saw the light of day. In the history books, Turn On holds the dubious honor of being one of the fastest cancellations in television history. Ironically, its jarring editing style foreshadowed the rapid-cut comedy and meme-like humor we now see all over the internet. Back then, though, it was a crash landing of epic proportions. The Tammy Grimes Show, 1966. How do you waste the talents of a Tony Award-winning Broadway star? Simple. Give her a sitcom with no clear premise. The Tammy Grimes Show cast its glamorous lead as a scatterbrained heiress who burned through money and common sense with equal enthusiasm. On paper, it was supposed to be a breezy comedy about riches and mishaps. On screen, it was chaos. The pacing was frantic, the jokes fell flat, and audiences struggled to connect with Grimes's eccentric character. ABC hoped she would be the next Lucille Ball, but instead, viewers were baffled by her antics. By the time the fourth episode aired, ratings had cratered so badly that the network axed it immediately, leaving a dozen episodes unaired. Critics were merciless, calling it one of the most confusing debuts of the decade. Grimes herself later admitted she never understood what the show was supposed to be about. For someone who could electrify a Broadway stage, being stuck in a muddled sitcom felt like punishment. Today, the Tammy Grimes Show is remembered less as comedy and more as a case study in how not to launch a TV star. My Mother the Car, 1965 to 66. Sometimes a bad idea makes history just by being so bad. Enter My Mother the Car, a sitcom whose premise still boggles the mind. A man's late mother is reincarnated as a talking antique automobile. Yes, really. Every week, Jerry Van Dyke chatted with the sassy voice of his mom, a 1928 Porter touring car. She dispensed advice, nagged him from the dashboard, and generally drove the plot literally. NBC packaged it as a heartwarming family comedy, but the premise was simply too outlandish. Viewers laughed, but not in the way the network hoped. Critics immediately branded it one of the worst shows ever conceived. It lasted a full season of 30 episodes, mostly because NBC had nothing to replace it with. The series became a pop culture punchline, ranking high on worst television lists for decades. And yet, there's something oddly charming about its audacity. In hindsight, My Mother the Car represents the anything-goes creativity of mid-60s TV. Sure, it crashed and burned, but it also left us with one of the most unforgettable flops in television lore. Mr. Terrific, 1967. The 60s loved superheroes, but not every cape soared. CBS tried to cash in on the craze with Mr. Terrific, a sitcom about an ordinary man who gained super strength from a secret government pill. The problem? His powers wore off in less than an hour. Stephen Strimpell starred as Stanley Beamish, a mild-mannered gas station attendant chosen for his perfect body chemistry. He bumbled through missions, saving the day just before his strength ran out. It was a parody of superhero tropes, aiming for campy fun. But audiences had already seen Batman deliver that kind of tongue-in-cheek spectacle, only with better writing, brighter costumes, and an actual fan base. The special effects were clumsy, the humor thin, and ratings never took off. After just one season, Mr. Terrific disappeared faster than its hero's superpowers. Still, It's remembered as an odd cultural artifact, a show trying to ride the superhero wave but sinking instead. If nothing else, it proved that not every cape and tights idea deserved a primetime spotlight. Captain Nice, 1967. If one failed superhero spoof wasn't enough, NBC launched Captain Nice the same year. Created by Buck Henry, the co-writer of Get Smart, this series featured William Daniels as a timid police chemist who discovers a formula that turns him into a bumbling crime fighter. His costume? A frilly, ill-fitting suit made by his overbearing mother. His powers? Flight and strength, but paired with zero confidence. Every episode revolved around Nice fumbling through fights, tripping over his cape, and barely stopping criminals by accident. The idea was to lampoon the superhero genre, but instead it felt like a watered-down copy of Batman, with none of the style or charm. Audiences weren't impressed. Critics dismissed it as silly and forgettable, and NBC pulled the plug after just 15 episodes. Looking back, Captain Nice is a prime example of networks rushing to cash in on trends without adding anything new. The 60s were flooded with caped parodies, and this one simply couldn't keep up. The result? Another colorful but short-lived entry in television's Hall of Flops. The Ugliest Girl in Town, 1968 to 69. Television has seen its fair share of oddball ideas, but few were stranger than The Ugliest Girl in Town. This ABC sitcom starred Peter Kastner as Timothy, a Hollywood talent agent, who through a bizarre series of events ends up disguised as a woman and becomes a London fashion model. Yes, a sitcom built on a man living a double life in wigs and dresses. On paper, it was a screwball comedy about mistaken identities. In practice, it was cringe-inducing. The jokes leaned on endless slapstick and stereotypes, and critics tore it apart almost instantly. What made matters worse was that ABC was trying to ride the wave of swinging London's popularity, but instead, the show felt outdated even as it premiered. The premise wore thin, fast audiences didn't buy the disguise, and ratings collapsed. After just 20 episodes, the show was canned, with 3 never even making it to air. Looking back, it's often cited as one of the strangest relics of 60s television. In a decade full of daring experiments, this one went so far off the rails, it became infamous. The title alone guaranteed laughs for all the wrong reasons, cementing The Ugliest Girl in Town as a true misfire. It's About Time, 1966 to 67. When Sherwood Schwartz, the creator of Gilligan's Island, pitched It's About Time, CBS thought they had another hit. The idea was wacky but simple. 2 astronauts accidentally time travel back to the Stone Age and befriend a family of cavemen. The series launched with a catchy theme song and plenty of slapstick. The astronauts clashed with primitive life, using their modern knowledge to survive. But after a few months, Schwartz panicked. Ratings were slipping, so he flipped the concept mid-season. Suddenly, the cavemen were transported to 20th century America, trying to adjust to city life. Audiences were confused, critics were merciless, and the show collapsed under its own gimmicks. Despite all the retooling, It's About Time only lasted 1 season before disappearing, yet the show remains memorable for how hard it swung for the fences. It's a great reminder that even proven producers can overplay their hand. If Gilligan's Island was lovable nonsense, It's About Time was just nonsense too chaotic to survive. The Hathaways, 1961 to 62. Every now and then, a show comes along that makes you wonder, who thought this was a good idea? That's exactly the reaction to The Hathaways, a sitcom about a suburban couple raising 3 chimpanzees as their children. Peggy Cass and Jack Weston starred as the human parents, while the chimps were costumed, coached, and given elaborate set pieces. The gags revolved around the monkeys' mischief-ruining dinner parties, breaking things, or embarrassing guests. ABC tried to sell it as wholesome family fun, but critics weren't buying it. Reviews called it distasteful and the worst television of the season. The Humane Society even complained about the use of trained animals. Ratings tanked almost immediately, and ABC quietly canceled it after just 1 season. What's wild is that the chimps were actually popular attractions outside of TV, appearing in commercials and live performances. But stretched into a weekly sitcom, the novelty wore off fast. Today, The Hathaways is remembered as one of the strangest failures of the early 60s, proof that not every gimmick works on primetime television. The Pruitts of Southampton launched The Phyllis Diller Show, 1966 to 67. ABC thought it had a winning formula when it signed comedian Phyllis Diller for her own sitcom. The Pruitts of Southampton, later retitled The Phyllis Diller Show, centered on a wealthy family forced to pretend they were still rich after losing their fortune. It should have worked. Diller was a comedy powerhouse known for her sharp one-liners and outrageous persona. But the scripts failed her. Episodes recycled the same high society meets low budget jokes again and again. The laugh track did more heavy lifting than the actual writing, and critics noticed. Midway through the season, desperate for ratings, ABC rebranded the entire show under Diller's name. But the damage was already done. Audiences had tuned out, and the show was canceled after just one season. The lesson here? A strong star can't save a weak concept. Even with Diller's charisma, the series never found its rhythm. Instead, it stands as an example of a network chasing a personality without giving her the material to shine. The Baileys of Balboa, 1964 to 65. CBS wanted a seaside comedy to rival Gilligan's Island, so they rolled out The Baileys of Balboa. The show followed Sam Bailey, a gruff charter boat captain, trying to run his small-time business against wealthy yacht owners in sunny California. It was billed as a clash between working-class grit and coastal snobbery, but in reality, it was just dull. The jokes never landed, the characters lacked depth, and audiences didn't care about Bailey's feuds with the yacht club elite. Critics panned it as uninspired, and worse, it was stuck in direct competition with Peyton Place, a ratings juggernaut of the time. The result was disastrous. The Baileys of Balboa was canceled after one season, quickly forgotten by most viewers. The show's biggest legacy is that it proved networks couldn't just chase trends without adding anything new. While Gilligan's Island leaned into silly adventure, Bailey's felt like background noise. It's a classic example of a flop that never stood a chance. The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., 1966 to 67. When The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was a hit, NBC figured a spin-off was a no-brainer. Enter The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., starring Stephanie Powers as April, dancer, a stylish young spy sent on globe-trotting missions. The setup promised high-tech gadgets, exotic locales, and a dose of swinging 60s glamour. But here's the problem. The show leaned too heavily on camp. While The Man from U.N.C.L.E. balanced action with sly humor, The Girl drowned itself in outlandish plots and cartoonish villains. Instead of sharp espionage thrills, viewers got forgettable storylines and tongue-in-cheek silliness that felt more parody than suspense. Critics called it shallow, and audiences tuned out after the novelty wore off. Even guest stars like Boris Karloff in Drag couldn't save it. After just one season, NBC canceled it, quietly sweeping it under the rug. In hindsight, the spin-off could have been groundbreaking, a female-led spy series in the middle of James Bond mania. But without strong scripts, April Dancer became less a trailblazer and more a missed opportunity. Today it's remembered as a flop that should have been a hit if only the writing had matched the concept. The Loner, 1965 to 66. Rod Serling. The genius behind The Twilight Zone tried something different with The Loner. This Western drama starred Lloyd Bridges as William Colton, a Civil War veteran wandering the frontier in search of purpose. It was meant to be gritty, realistic, and thought-provoking, an antidote to the romanticized Westerns filling the airwaves. But the viewing public didn't want thoughtful meditations on war and morality. They wanted gunfights, bar brawls, and clear heroes and villains. Serling's scripts were too heavy for Saturday night entertainment, tackling issues like justice alienation and the human cost of violence. Critics appreciated the ambition, but most viewers found it slow and depressing. Ratings sagged, and CBS dropped it after just one season. What's tragic is that The Loner has aged far better than many Westerns of its time. It showed Serling's commitment to intelligent television even outside science fiction. But in the 60s, audiences weren't ready for a Western that dared to be serious. Instead, it became another noble experiment that flopped in real time. Coronet Blue, 1967. Few shows embody the phrase, lost potential, like Coronet Blue. The series followed Michael Alden, a man with amnesia whose only memory was the phrase Coronet Blue. Week after week, he tried to uncover his identity, while being pursued by mysterious enemies. The pilot had style, suspense, and a promising mystery hook. Viewers were intrigued, The problem? CBS aired the episodes completely out of order, shuffling the storyline until it made little sense. On top of that, 2 episodes never aired at all, leaving the central mystery unresolved. Fans were left frustrated, critics were baffled, and the show collapsed after just 11 episodes. To this day, Coronet Blue is shorthand for a promising mystery that never delivers. Ironically, decades later, cult fans rediscovered the show and praised its ambition. But in the 60s, without narrative consistency, audiences simply gave up. What could have been a gripping psychological thriller turned into one of the most famous unfinished flops of the era. Garrison's Gorillas, 1967 to 68. Inspired by The Dirty Dozen, ABC launched Garrison's Gorillas, a war drama about a tough army officer leading a group of convicted criminals on dangerous missions during World War II. The premise promised gritty action, moral conflict, and high-stakes drama. But what worked as a movie didn't translate to weekly television. The characters were thinly sketched, the plots repetitive, and the production values modest compared to the big-screen spectacle audiences were expecting. Despite heavy promotion, ratings stalled. Viewers complained it was neither realistic enough to satisfy war buffs nor light enough to appeal to casual audiences. By the end of its first season, ABC quietly canceled it. The irony is that Garrison's Gorillas could have paved the way for more morally complex dramas. Instead, it felt like a pale imitation of its cinematic inspiration. Today, it's remembered as a classic 60s flop, a reminder that copying a hit movie doesn't always guarantee success on TV. The New People, 1969 to 1970. Imagine a group of young Americans stranded on an island forced to build their own society from scratch. Sounds a bit like Lost decades ahead of time, right? That was the premise of The New People, an ambitious ABC drama written in part by Rod Serling. The hook was strong. A plane load of college students crashes on a deserted island, leaving them to start a new world free from adult control. The network even scheduled it as a 45-minute show to squeeze in extra ads, hoping it would be groundbreaking. But instead of gripping drama, the series devolved into repetitive squabbles. The social commentary felt heavy-handed, and viewers found the young cast unconvincing as leaders of a utopian experiment. After just 17 episodes, the show was axed. Still, it's fascinating in hindsight. The New People was decades ahead of its time, tackling themes of youth rebellion, societal collapse, and survival. It failed in the 60s, but foreshadowed the kind of serialized storytelling that would thrive on television much later. The Jean Arthur Show, 1966. When CBS signed beloved Hollywood actress Jean Arthur for her own sitcom, expectations were sky high. The Jean Arthur Show cast her as Patricia Marshall, a lawyer running a practice with her son, played by Ron Harper. It was meant to combine Arthur's sparkling wit with timely workplace comedy, but timing is everything, and this show had none. Arthur, once a box office darling in the 30s and 40s, struggled to adjust to the demands of a weekly sitcom. Her nervous energy, which had charmed film audiences, came across as jittery on the small screen. Scripts leaned heavily on tired generation gap. Gags and the supporting cast never clicked. Even critics who admired Arthur's earlier career admitted the series felt dated from the start. Ratings were dismal, and CBS canceled it after only 12 episodes. In hindsight, it's bittersweet. Jean Arthur was a legend, but television didn't play to her strengths. Instead of a grand comeback, she got saddled with one of the decade's shortest-lived flops. Today, the series is more trivia than entertainment, remembered mostly as a curious misstep in a brilliant career. Mr. Roberts, 1965 to 66. The stage play Mr. Roberts was a Broadway triumph, and the film adaptation with Henry Fonda was a hit. So naturally, NBC thought a sitcom version would also succeed. They were wrong. Mr. Roberts, the TV show, starred Roger Smith in the title role aboard a Navy cargo ship during World War II. The idea was to mine lighthearted comedy out of life at sea, but translating a sharp stage drama into a weekly laugh fest drained the story of its edge. The naval setting looked cheap, the humor felt forced, and audiences who remembered the play and film were unimpressed. To make matters worse, it aired against stiff competition and never found its audience. By the end of its single season, it sank quietly from the schedule. This one proves that not every acclaimed story is built for television. Mr. Roberts thrived on character nuance and tension, two things the sitcom format stripped away. Instead of prestige, it wound up as another casualty in '60s, television's rush to adapt familiar titles. Occasional Wife, 1966 to '67. NBC loved high-concept sitcoms, and Occasional Wife fit the bill perfectly. The plot revolved around Peter Christopher, a bachelor who pretends to be married in order to climb the corporate ladder. His wife, played by Patricia Hardy, agrees to the sham arrangement in exchange for free rent in his apartment building. The series milked the setup for every gag possible: awkward encounters with the boss cover-ups when dates came over, and constant arguments between the fake couple. The problem was that the show never grew beyond its gimmick. Every week felt like the same joke recycled, and viewers got tired quickly. Critics dismissed it as lightweight fluff, and ratings couldn't keep it afloat. After just one season, NBC pulled the plug. Still, Occasional Wife is remembered fondly by some as a time capsule of '60s sitcom excess when networks were obsessed with clever hooks, even if they couldn't sustain them. It wasn't a total disaster, but it never earned a spot in TV history beyond being another one-season wonder. Pistols and Petticoats, 1966 to '67. CBS tried to mix Western grit with sitcom charm in Pistols and Petticoats, starring Ann Sheridan as part of a family of sharpshooters living in the Wild West. The show promised action comedy and a progressive twist, a strong female lead. But tragedy struck behind the scenes. Ann Sheridan, battling serious illness, passed away before the season finished filming. The show struggled to continue without her star power, and ratings quickly declined. Even aside from Sheridan's loss, the show never found its identity. It was too silly for fans of serious westerns, and too dusty for lovers of pure sitcoms. After just one season, it vanished from the schedule. Today it's remembered more for Sheridan's final performance than for the content of the series itself. In an era when westerns dominated television, Pistols and Petticoats stands out as one that couldn't hit the target despite its unique premise. Blue Light, 1966. ABC thought it had a winner with Blue Light, a spy drama set in World War II starring Robert Goulet. The twist? Goulet's character was a double agent pretending to work for the Germans while secretly gathering intelligence for the Allies. On paper, it sounded thrilling: espionage, tension, and moral ambiguity. On screen, it was muddled and flat. The writing failed to build suspense, Goulet seemed miscast as a secret agent, and the show never caught fire with viewers. After only 17 episodes, Blue Light was canceled. In an unusual twist, the first 4 episodes were later spliced together into a theatrical film called Ideal in Danger. Even that failed to leave a lasting impression. Blue Light is one of those shows that proves not every serious drama of the '60s landed with audiences. Instead of an exciting spy thriller, viewers got a slow, uneven series that faded almost as quickly as it appeared. So, there you have it. 20 more '60s TV flops, each one a reminder that even in television's golden decade, not everything turned to gold. Some were ahead of their time, others were just plain bizarre, and a few never stood a chance. Which of these forgotten misfires surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with another retro TV fan, and don't forget to subscribe. Who knows, maybe the next flop is already on the air.